Hey, I'm Becca, and I am a technical community builder, and I am one of the creators and maintainers of Virtual Coffee IO. And today I'm talking about how to create a positive community for your open source project. And I think that this is one of the most undervalued things, right? When we have an open source project, we want contributors. And we're more likely to get contributors if we cultivate the community that happens there. And what does that mean? That means the people who are contributing, who are interacting, who are using your product. It means the people who are reading your READMEs, the people who are interested in being a part of the community, who are interested in contributing in some way. And we want to create a space that's really welcoming for them. And so how do we do that? Well, first of all, I think a solid README for the organization is really important, right? This is our Virtual Coffee README. It tells a little bit about Virtual Coffee, who we are, what our mission is, how you can sponsor us, but all of the things that we're doing, right? And it gives a little bit more context about who we are. So people who are interested in contributing to Virtual Coffee can learn about what they're contributing to, how they can be part of that conversation, how they can become part of the story, how they can become part of the community. So creating a good README is a really good start to onboarding people into your project. So definitely think about what that looks like and how you're telling that story. And now one of the next ways that you can work on this is creating individual READMEs for your repository. So what does the README say? And how are you sharing the information that's important to the contributors who are here? Okay, we know about your organization. We understand a little bit about your community, but what does that mean for that particular repository? What does that mean for your open source project? And that's what the README on an individual repo does. It creates a space that also, again, I'm going to use the word onboard. It onboards new community members to help them understand this is what we are, this is what this project is about, this is how you can be a part of this open source project, okay? And so for us, we talk a little bit about how this project is built, what we're using, the technology that we're using, what you should do if you're interested in contributing. So we talk about our contributing guidelines, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but we also talk about like how to contribute. So we want to be able to onboard new community members, people who are new to tech, all the way to people who have a lot of experience. And I think that it's totally fine and valid to say that, okay, we don't have the bandwidth to support people who are contributing to open source for the first time. I think that the README is a really great place to indicate that information. So finding some way to let them know about working on the site, contributing to this repository. Where is the level setting? Because what you don't want to do is have issues open and say, this is a good first issue, and then it not really be a good first issue, right? If somebody comes on and they're new to tech and they're contributing for the first time, and they find that they have this issue that they really want to work on in your repository, but this seems way over their head, that's a really great way to separate yourself from that person and make sure that they never come back to your project. So I think that level setting is really important. And even if it's, hey, we're really sorry, we can't contribute, we can't support new contributors right now, I think that's a really great way to communicate that maybe in the future you want to support that group of people, but you can't do it. And that's really, really valid to say that. And also it helps them to understand that in the future, this might be a really great place for them to contribute, but right now, that's not really a good opportunity for them. You should also provide, I always love a solid table of contents. My background is in English and I love tables of contents and I love glossaries when they are available. But how do you get this set up, right? What are the steps to setting up this project so people can contribute? Having those might seem like it should be understood, but we should never make assumptions about our contributors, right? And so we talk through all of this information, and then we talk about how you can do different issues. So for us at Virtual Coffee, we have specific issues that come up recurring. And these recurring issues, we have explanations for how to deal with this every single time, and we link to that in our issues. And actually, a couple of our issues are automated issues. They come up monthly, and so we have those in a GitHub workflow to make sure that they're consistently up there, but they also provide explanations for people who are interested in contributing. And so there's more information there that you can find out. So finding ways to create clear paths of communication is incredibly important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But what I want to say is having a clear code of conduct. This is one of the first pieces of advice that I had when I was starting Virtual Coffee and asking around like, hey, I think this is going to be an organization that's going to be around for a while. What is the first thing I should do? And so many people told me you need to create a code of conduct. And my background is not in tech, and the idea of having a code of conduct was really foreign to me. It wasn't something that I had experienced as a teacher in my previous profession. And so I asked for examples, and I got some information about how to create a code of conduct. But the point of a code of conduct is to create a safe space for all of your community members. And that's why I think it's incredibly important to have a code of conduct. At the very least, there are some templated code of conducts out there that you can be using that helps you to communicate with your community members, to help them feel safe and supported. And that's exactly the point of a code of conduct. You want everybody to feel safe and supported and able to grow in what they're doing. And so having that code of conduct established and linked in your README is incredibly important. And for us, we have a central repository for our Virtual Coffee code of conduct because there's a lot of information there. And you might find that that's too overbearing to have in a README, and often it is, but you still want people to agree to what your code of conduct is. What are your standards? What is unacceptable behavior? Cultural citizenship is one of those things that I learned a lot about since coming into tech, and I think it's incredibly important, right? What are the goals of the community? How do you enforce those goals? You want positivity. You want people that can learn and grow together, but how do you create that? How do you create a community, an environment where people are willing to learn and grow together? They're not just there to ask questions and to leave. They're there to grow with each other. And then what does it mean to have responsibilities? What does it mean to have privacy? And very, very importantly, how do you report a code of conduct violation? If there's an issue that's happening within your community, how do they know they're going to continue to be safe? If something happens, how are you going to deal with that situation? And I think that idea of having that code of conduct violation form and having those enforcement guidelines is hugely important to making sure that your community continues to feel safe and they understand the process of what it means to go through the code of conduct. And if you check out, we have some code of conduct has been adapted from a couple of different places. And one of those things that should always be living and breathing with your community. You changed it based on the needs. You changed it based on what you see in the industry. So always make sure that this is not a one and done kind of thing. This is something that you're always willing to work on. And the next part of this is creating that good README, right? You want to have all of those things outlined. You want to have the links of everything that we've talked about so far and make sure that's included in your repository. As part of that, we want to further detail what the contributors should be looking for. Okay, so we have a link in the README, and now we have a contributing.md file. And this talks to you a little bit more. We also repeat a link to the code of conduct because that's very important to us and we want to make sure that we emphasize that. So what does it mean? How do you communicate within this group of people? This is really important. It walks through the steps of the process. It talks to you about how to get started. And for us, we onboard a lot of very new contributors to open source. And so we have those resources out there that are for new contributors, such as setting up a GitHub account, what discussions look like. Discussions are very important to us. And this kind of goes along the next line of creating clear paths of communication that I'm going to talk about in a second. What types of contributions you're looking for. So if you don't want to prioritize, for example, spelling updates, then you can indicate that in what type of contributions you're looking for. If you're able to pair, that's a good thing to put in your contributing file. If you're not able to pair, that's another thing. Hey, we're not able to pair, but there are some organizations that are willing to work with us on this issue. So we're happy to set up that interaction. Or we're unable to set up that interaction right now, but if you reach out to other folks, there might be some support that you can find outside of our open source project. So we walk through all of those things just to make sure that everybody at all stages of the open source contributing journey are able to be a part of this interaction, right? Also, a little bit of level setting expectations. So sometimes you submit a pull request to an open source project and you don't hear back for a very long time. And you think to yourself, are they not reviewing my pull request? Did I not do a good job? Have they forgotten about me? I think that level setting is a really great way to do it in your contributing guide, because a lot of us are doing this during volunteer hours. We don't have work hours to commit to this particular part of our lives. And it's totally okay and it's valid to say that, hey, we want to get to these pull requests as soon as possible, but it might not happen very quickly. And we're doing our best. So please be patient with us, but creating those clear paths of communication, letting folks know that it might take a little while to get through these things is really important as you're going through that journey. And so if you know, and this is, again, contributing.md is a living document. So you might find at some point you have tons of volunteers who are willing to review pull requests, they're willing to write issues. But then at some point, they don't have that same capacity. They might have changed jobs, they might have a different family situation, doesn't matter. Having that expectation for your contributors helps to decrease that burden to entry and to continue contributing to your repository. So highly recommend that you work hard to be able to spell out what it means to be awaiting for review, what happens after you contribute to an open source document. And also, as part of this level setting, if you are suggesting changes, does this happen often? Is feedback anticipated and expected? I have a project that I work on that there's not that much feedback that happens as part of that project. And I think that's okay. That's the stage of the project. But in other projects, you might say, hey, almost every single pull request we have, there's feedback that's provided and we ask you to make updates to your pull request. If that's the case, letting your contributors know is going to be a really great way to help them understand what is the full journey of contributing to this open source project. We've got a couple of tips and gotchas there. We have more information about what to do if you're reporting a bug. We have some labeling conventions as well. So the more information that you can give, a way that's organized, a way that has clear headings and table of contents, really helps to onboard those new contributors. And finally, we have this our GitHub workflow. And I think that as part of creating clear paths of communication, we want to do things like create issue templates. We want to create pull request templates, right? And so what does this mean? So we have a bug report template and it looks a certain way, right? This helps the person who's contributing understand what are their expectations. Thank you for filling out this bug report. Now, what do we want to know about this? How can this help? This helps both the contributors and the maintainers at the same time, right? We're able as maintainers to identify more quickly what we need to prioritize if we have a clear understanding of the issues that are happening. For contributors, it makes it a little bit easier because they're more able to identify what is the most pertinent information that I need to be sharing at this point. And so if you can create an issue template, this can help you to better be able to sort through those things and to help your contributors contribute in a way that makes sense for the project and for them. So I highly recommend those issue templates, and that can be a bug report. We have content change, documentation change, feature request, TypeScript conversion. These are all things that we're actively working on our site. We also have pull request templates. And so you can see a little bit more about this. It's not as in-depth, but we want to make sure that there's some kind of outline. And if you have pull request templates, if you have issue templates, this again helps to onboard new contributors who are interested in being a part of your open source community. And the last thing that I want to say about creating a solid open source community is that you want to make sure that there are clear paths of communication. This comes through all of the things that we've talked about, and as part of that, outlining how do you communicate with the contributors. So maybe it's just through issues and pull requests and the commentary that happens there. But it's worth noting that not every project is the same, and you need to take that into consideration. So at Virtual Coffee and a number other of open source repositories that I work on, we have GitHub discussions enabled. And there are different things that are pinned at the top, and there are different ways to communicate. So maybe somebody has an idea. It's not fully formed, it's not ready to be an issue, but it's ready to be discussed. Maybe that's the information that goes into the issue section or into the discussion section. And then the nice thing about having discussions is that, let me see if I can find. Okay, so we have a resource roundup. And so maybe we take these resources and we transfer these to a discussion, transfer this discussion to an issue. So what we can do is we can take what we've learned here, sorry, and we can create an issue for that thing. And once things have been transformed to an issue, has escalated that conversation. And this is the point where it makes sense for it to be part of our site. And so I think that all of these things go to create clear paths of communication, and that should be the number one priority of all open source communities, to create clear paths of communication, to onboard new community members, and to find ways to continually support them in scalable ways. So I think that it's really important for you to consider all of these things and probably more as you create that open source community that you're looking for. But if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Thanks. Hey.